Well, the purpose for this tutorial is to talk a lot about Adobe Audition 3.0. Now, some of the things I'm going to cover in this short tutorial are quick tips, easy things, what the cursor means, and it's very important on where you click and what that can do for you. And I'm going to give you some tips there. Adobe Audition 3.0 is a staple, a mainstay in broadcast studios, at least here in our building. We use it in our control rooms, our production rooms, and even in some of our offices for our production program directors and brand managers. We use Adobe Audition almost every day. The tips I'm going to give you apply to Adobe Audition 3.0, 2.0, and 1.5, and some of them even apply to the older versions of Cool Edit. But I'm going to cover some general basics here in this video that will help you understand a little bit more about Adobe and perhaps give you some tips and tricks that are quicker than you first are doing now anyway. The first thing you'll notice when you click on and open up Adobe is that there's a File, Edit, View window just like normal in Windows. However, you get to Effects, Generate Favorites options, and that kind of stuff, and we'll go into those in just a minute. By the way, if this video gets good traction and a lot of views, I may go into a more in-depth video on what Adobe Audition can do, but that's down the road. The second thing I want you to look at right after the File, Edit, View options are the Edit and Multitrack options. Edit is normally used for a single piece of audio, whether that be stereo, mono. It's a single piece of audio that you're just editing linearly. And we're making linear edits in a piece of audio, and they're also called destructive edits, and we'll talk about that later. But there's also the multi-track, which is the second window per se, or the second tab of the feature set for Adobe 3.0. And multi-track is where you can layer things on top of one another, multi-track. And we can talk about what that track is special about a little bit later too. What I want you to notice though is if I'm in the edit option and I click the edit window, which is this main window here, if I click on it, I can actually change back and forth with my keyboard. If you'll look here by going to view, it'll tell you little tips and tricks on the side here. So for instance, if I wanted to go to the multi-track view, I hit the 9 on my keyboard. If I want to go to CD view, I hit 0. So when I click here and I hit 9, I go to the multi-track. If I hit 0, I go to the CD. And I can go back and forth from 8, which is the edit view, 9, which is the multi-track view, and 0, which is the CD view if you're going to burn CDs. Remember though, if you're on the Files menu and you hit those numbers, nothing happens. You have to be inside the main window. The next thing I'm going to show you is the Import File option. And I also want to show that there's a Show Options menu. A lot of the stuff in Adobe, if you just mouse over it and leave it for a second, it'll tell you what it does. The other thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is read what's next to the options here. Like for instance, Top Tails Views. If you wanted to do, and when we open a piece of audio, you'll see these quick keys here, like Shift W to do the waveform, Spectral View, which is Shift F. For the effects, there are no quick keys assigned yet, but I'll show you how to assign those in your favorites later on too. Just like here on the Windows, the window options, you can actually change your workspace around and save those. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. But first things first, the import file, I guess it's third now, import file. That's where you actually open up a piece of audio saved on your hard drive or your flash drive. But one thing people don't realize is you can double click inside the files window and still get that dialog. So what I did is I just I'm going to show you that again. I double clicked inside that window and it instantly opened up my piece of audio here. Now I'm just going to open up this bed. This is an MP3. It reads it, it opens up, but where'd it go? Oh, you have to double click on it to actually bring it into the edit window. And when you play it, I'm going to turn this down some. There's the audio. Okay, so we have the audio there. The cursor, if you'll notice, looks kind of like a beam or a column. Can you see that on my screen here? It's a little cursor there. It's right over there. The cursor itself can change as well, and if you'll notice that there's two options for cursors in the edit mode. The first one is this selector, what they call the time selection tool. The other one is called the scrub tool, and if you'll notice that there's a letter key next to it. So for instance, if I wanted to go to the scrub tool, I just hit my A. And if I wanted to go to the time selector tool, I just hit the S on the keyboard. See how mousing over that tells you what it does? So inside here, if you click anywhere, you'll get this yellow dotted line with no letters but a little yellow arrow on it. If you grab that little yellow arrow, you can drag it where you want it to go. Okay, that's number one. Number two, up on top, if you use your mouse to scroll, it will zoom in and out for you without having to use the zoom and feature keys down here. Some people like to click. I prefer scrolling because it's easier for me to zoom in and zoom out. If I need to zoom out over here on the side, if I wanted to look up and down in a piece of audio this way, you can put your mouse over here and zoom up and down, and that actually zooms up in and out vertically. Also know that right now we're looking at the dB scale. Double clicking this changes it to the samples. Double clicking it again changes it again. And one more time to percentage of what the view is. Now remember, percentages are arbitrary. 90% of your paycheck for you is different than 90% of my paycheck for me. Percentages are arbitrary. So I like the dB range simply because that's something that I'm familiar with, and the dB scale is something we use definitely here in Town Square. Down across the bottom, it's hours, minutes, seconds. But again, we can double click on that scale as well and change it to samples, or 30 feet per second, or the drop, or the beats per minute, and it can calculate that for you. FPS is a different frame rate, but I like hours, minutes, seconds because that's something that we can easily identify with. As we click around, you'll notice that there's a top channel and a bottom channel. If I move my mouse up to the top and strictly click the top where the L is present, it only highlights the left track. If I bring it down here to the bottom, where the R shows up next to my column cursor, my selector tool, only the right side of the piece of track will be highlighted. And I'll give you an example of that, just like this. Double, and I'll click off. Left, right. So you see what I had to do. I waited until I got up here until the L showed up, and then I can only select the left track. If I want to select both, I select somewhere around in here in the middle. Again, the scroll side on the top, the scroll side on the bottom, and then changing the meters that you use on either side. For us, we actually use, I'm playing music here, so you're familiar with this song. On the transport, I'm hitting the space bar to play, by the way. You don't have to, though. You can click the play. But remember that clicking the play plays from wherever the yellow cursor is. Notice that. So if I click here and I click play again, it picks up where I left off. This round circle actually plays from where the cursor is to the end of the view, and I'm going to show you why that's important. So if I'm working on a piece of the audio in here, and I play just this much with the space bar, I want it to play from here to the end of the view and stop like that. So that's what the little round play is, from the cursor to the end of the view. If I want to play it all the way through, I just use the normal play from cursor to the end of file play, and it continues and actually tracks with it. And you'll take a look at that, see how it automatically lines up. The next thing is the looped view, or the selection that you have. So for instance, if we're going to select a piece, we can hit the loop and it'll continue to play that in the loop. Now if we don't have anything selected, it'll play the entire file looped, which we don't want to sit here and go through. Remember your transports for rewind and fast forward work, end of file and beginning of file. The home key goes to the beginning of the file every time. So you can hit the home key on the keyboard or the end key on the keyboard, and it automatically goes to the home and end of the file. The next thing I'm just going to show you is the scrub tool. Some people use it, some people like it, some people don't. Notice that there's a speaker when I select the scrub tool. Remember, by hitting the A on my keyboard, it automatically selects the scrub tool. If I click anywhere in the file where the cursor goes and move my mouse to the right or the left, it scrubs, okay, just like a normal scrub wheel would on another type of audio processor. If I drag it slowly, it actually plays slower. One of the things that I want to encourage you to look at, besides what's at the top, the samples on the sides and the meters on the left and bottom, is down here in the bottom. We've just covered the transports. This is the time signature. The time signature, and I'm going to change back to my normal cursor, and I'm going to hit the S to do so instead of actually clicking up there. Is the time signature. Now we can actually drag these over and make them larger. I enjoy having it about here because my transports, there's no more buttons we need to add there. So I just use up that room so I know where my time signature is. As it plays, let's say we want to get to about the minute mark. So I'm going to use my left and right arrows to drill down to about a minute. And I, of course, zoomed in by putting my mouse over the top cursor and zoomed in so I can make a finer selection here. Okay, so that's pretty darn close to a minute. Now I can zoom out, but what if I want to keep in my mind where that 1 minute mark is? Well, that's the cool part about the F8. It's called a marker. And it actually, all it does is place a marker in that spot, so I know roughly where the 1 minute mark is. Now you can marker different things, different words, different pieces, but the marker to me is a really good way of kind of putting a little tab where you want a time signature or perhaps where something specific happened in a piece of audio. The really neat thing is if you're recording and somebody flubs up and you're recording live, you can hit that F8 while it's recording and it'll put that marker there to remind you to go back and edit that piece. That's a really good effective piece for me. The next thing is the zoom tools, and again, you know, the zoom tools are just like the transports. There's not going to be any more than 8 of them here, and they do the same things as scrolling on the top and on the sides, in and out. That's what they do best. Remember, you can also click and drag this to recenter it. The last one is the selection view. Now in the time signatures here, in the selection view, right now I'm at 121 of my entire piece, which is represented by the selection, which just means that I have a cursor at that 121 position. The entire length is 3 minutes, 46 seconds, 56 milliseconds. Now if I wanted to select a piece, it actually gives me 2 lengths. One is the beginning of the this arrow here. Do you see it? It looks kind of like a little triangle. And the other one is the other triangle. So if you think about the beginning and end, it's these 2 points. That's what those are. On the entire time signal of 346, 1 minute 14 in is this triangle, 1 minute 31 in is this triangle. And you can, instead of trying to narrow it down, you can move those by clicking on them. So if I wanted to drag something from 1 minute over to here, I can expand that. Just keep in mind that your selection and your view are based on the entire track. So when you do a view, for instance, it's showing you the end of the view, which is 351. However, when we zoom in, I'm only viewing from 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'm roughly viewing about 2 minutes and 10 seconds of audio, or 13 seconds in length, which is here. So if I actually highlight that, that's 13 seconds of audio. There are also other views. I use that word loosely. There's the spectral frequency view, and if you're looking at it, you can actually see the spectral way that this, and this is in hertz. So if you actually hear a hiss or a tone or a pop or a click in your audio, where it does, if you see a small line where you've got some kind of line degradation or a garbage getting in there, you'll actually see that piece of garbage across the top here. This is really a good tool to look at to see if you hear a hiss or a pop before you actually go into the hiss and pop eliminator to get it out of there. This is actually a neat view. A lot of people don't use it. It's called the spectral pan display. It lets you know which way it pans. Now it looks normal from afar, but as we zoom in, it really gets pretty. It's actually quite beautiful when you get into the spectral look of it. What you're looking at is the pans from the different left and right channels, and this shows you exactly which frequencies are moving left and right. It's a really neat view. And lastly, it's phase. So if you have a problem with phase, you can actually look at phase and see what that looks like across the gamut here. And we're going to look at phase and just kind of zoom in here and see if there's anything special we can see. You know, you can actually visit. This is actually a really good tool. The Spectral pan display. You notice how all the lines are contiguous, they're all connected? When you make an edit, and I'm going to make it right there, you can actually catch those edits. Forensics and forensic audio, you can find sometimes that if you look at them closely, you'll find where the lines break. And that's a telltale indicator of an edit of the piece of audio. Not that we do that a lot here in radio, but the other thing, since we're zooming in so much on all these views, I wanted to show you. As you zoom in, I don't know if you've ever taken time to zoom in this far, but there are these little squares. And these little squares are, they don't even show up on the length meter, but these little squares are the samples. And I'm sure you've heard of a sample rate before, and that sample rate is represented down here in the very bottom part of the taskbar. But before I get there, I'm going to keep going down the row here. So if you look, the next thing is the levels meter. That's across the bottom. Some people like to grab their levels meter and put it up on the side here, because they're used to seeing VU meters up that way. Now, I kind of like mine down the bottom, and I'm moving them here to show you that you can move them in different places. If you'll notice too that as I move them around, they change position. I kind of like mine down on the very bottom, simply because I can see it across, and it's very similar to my audio editor that I use for our automation system here. And it's measured right now in dB. So remember, it's dBFS because it's a digital signal. But lastly, after we look at the levels here, we can see them playing across. Okay. Now remember that this is a -9 coming from 0. Okay. So it's a -9, and the way I can describe that best to you is if you can imagine this as being a 3D waveform. It's not just 2D like we're looking at here. It's actually 3D. So if you can imagine like a tennis ball can, in a string going through the center of the tennis ball can, this wave is going around that string. So 0 would be the string. Anything over that would be a negative or away from that string, minus so many dB, decibels, outside of that string. So that's a good way to think of it. But let's look at the next thing on the list is the multitrack. Now, one more thing I forgot. Looking at the file over here on the left-hand side, all of a sudden when I put that marker there, there's now a plus next to it so I can expand it and go to that marker cue. I don't know if you watched that. I'm going to move it over here. There's my marker cue. I'm going to go all the way to the end of the file. But now that I have my plus here, I can double click on that plus and it takes me to my marker file. I forgot to tell you about that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the multitrack. Now there's two different ways to bring audio into the multitrack, at least that I know of. The first way is what most people are aware of, and they grab the piece of audio and drag it over to the left-hand side. Now that was really simple, and I'm going to show you that again. You just drag it over. Now where you release it is where it winds up. Okay? So if I drag it, and I drag it over here, it's going to show up all on this side. But I don't want that. What I want is I want it to go right to the home spot. So notice where my cursor is right now. I'm going to hit the home key to make sure it's furthest to the left. And I'm going to do something neat. I'm going to select a piece of audio, right click on it, and insert it into the multitrack. Guess where it went? Right where I wanted it to. If I wanted to put another piece here, I go back into my original file, grab what I want, insert that into the multitrack, and guess where it went? Exactly on the track and exactly in the position on my piece where I wanted it. Really better option for you than just kind of dragging things over. If you're a visual person and you need to drag them over, more power to you. The whole concept here, though, is to make things a lot quicker for you and easier and not having to redo work. So why drag it over once to move it where you want it instead of just putting it where you want it in the beginning? The next thing I wanted you to notice, down here on the bottom, you'll see the left and right. At the very bottom of my screen, I'm pointing. Down here on the very bottom, it shows that it stopped, and it actually shows the decibel levels and the time signatures. So if you ever want to know how loud something is at a certain point, or what the peak is, you can find that quickly by mousing over it and reading down here on the very bottom of what it says. The next thing is the sample rate, the bit rate, and whether or not it's stereo or mono. Right now we're at 48,000 samples and 16 bits. Now, Our operating system, our automation system, doesn't like 48,000 sample rate stereo. They really, our file converter where we are, likes 44/100 16-bit. And the reason for that is it varies where you go. It's a garbage in, garbage out thing. The more samples you have, if you have 48,000, you can always downsample to 44,100. That's easy, going from 48,000 to 44,100. Upsampling, it has to extrapolate. The best way I know how to describe that is connect the dots. If you've ever had a connect the dots picture where you've only got 5 or 6 dots, it's really crude. The image is really crude. The more dots you add, the cleaner the image. So the more samples you have, the cleaner the sound. 16-bit is normal for us here, and the way we change back and forth, like I said, the piece of audio right now is 48,000 16-bit. I'm going to hit the F11 key on my keyboard, and that will bring up the Convert Sample Type dialog. We're going to select 44/100 stereo 16-bit and click OK. It takes a second to sample that and change it, and now all of a sudden down at the bottom it says 44/100 16-bit. When I go to my multi-track editor and I drag it over now, look what happened. It opened up a 44/100 32-bit mixing multi-track session. Now, there's a difference between the edit dialog, where we're dealing with one file, and the multi-track, where we can deal with a session file. Now, that extension is called a .ses, or a session file. And what that means is it keeps track of where you have those multi-track pieces. So, for instance, if I want to drag another one here and another one here, and I wanted to edit it, and I like the way this sounded when I played it, track 1, 2, and 3. If I wanted to save this session as untitled.ses, I can save that. And it says, hey, you edited part of your file, do you want to save that too? And I said, I don't really want to save that, but I want to keep my session the same. Now here's the cool part. If I wanted to close the session, I can open the session back, and I'm going to go back to where that was. I believe that was in my music. It is. And watch what happens. The sample rate's different. Do you want to change it? I said yeah. And it's doing it for all 3 pieces of audio. And it's going to load that session. There it is. And it remembered where I put those pieces of audio. Okay? So that's what the benefit of the session file is. I'm going to go ahead and highlight these over here. And well, before I do that, I want to show you something else too. You can also sort these as you get more and more involved in having more and more pieces of audio. Keeping track of them is very difficult. Remember, though, that you can always rename them. Okay? When you rename them, you can sort them by file name or the recent access ones. If you want to sort by recent access, it's easier if you're going through a project and making modifications. It'll keep the most recent accessed one at the top. You can do the file type. If you're doing MP3s and waves, you can sort those that way. Same thing with the track number on a CD. I prefer to do file name just because my mind is linear like that, and I name my files that way. These are actually part of the Killer Tracks library, so they have the KT designation in the front. Onward to the multi-track mixer and editor. If you'll notice, the same rules apply for our scroll bars, left-hand side, right-hand side. As I scroll in here, I want to show you 3 things on the multi-track. The top one, we have something that we're actually looking at right now, and if you look, we have, and I'll show you this here. You see where it says Enable Clip Edge Dragging, Enable Clip Envelope Editing, Show Clip Pan Envelopes, Show Clip Volume Envelopes. Okay? Now, envelope, don't let envelope get you crazy. But what we're talking about is the volume, the pan, the clip envelope itself for editing, and the edge dragging. And I'll show you that. Edge dragging first is this this double arrow that shows up on along the edge when I place my cursor here. If I drag it, it's not destructive. The piece is still there, and I'm going to ditch these other 2 and show you. While it looks like I deleted part of that, if I go into the main file, the rest of the audio is still there. It's non-destructive. Okay? So think about it as like painting with a paintbrush. You can paint more audio in. Okay? Now the next thing are those envelopes that we were talking about. the volume and pan envelopes. And what these are these lines at the very top. And some people get distracted and frustrated actually with these envelopes. If you'll notice, when I click on the piece of audio I'm dealing with, if I mouse over the top, all of a sudden I get this finger with a plus next to it. Now that actually gives me a volume envelope. And the reason they call it that is because you can set a marker there and we'll make it drop out. And so I used 4 points in order to create that shape. Okay, that's general, normal stuff. But watch. And the volume fades out and is out until I come back with this. So it actually makes an envelope, okay, that you can change that. If you want to remove that, you can right click on them and remove that. That you can disable the clip envelopes for volume, or you can actually remove that particular placeholder. And I don't like doing that. Hold on just 1 second. There we go. The other envelope is called the pan envelope, which is here in the middle. Now, if you don't want to change the pan as you're going back and forth, if you don't want to change the pan of a thing as you're doing it for your effects, you don't have to. But I just adjusted the pan so it's left and right channel. So it goes full left channel, full right channel to this point. Okay? If you don't want the pan envelopes in there, you go to View, you take the pan envelopes out, and you can't see them anymore. The problem is we actually put one there. So if you haven't put one there, then I recommend leaving that off or disabling that until you're ready. Just remember the pan envelope is in the middle, the volume envelope is at the top. Here's another cool trick with the volume envelope, and I'm going to take this piece of audio and ditch it. I'm done with it. I'm going to bring another piece back. So when I put the other piece back and I hit the delete key to delete that piece of editing audio there, it removed the pan and volume envelopes. What I want to encourage you to do now, though, is take a look and hold down the control key as you get the finger at the top, and you hold down the control key. It brings the whole thing down. You see that across the board. Now it still puts that square there, but it's a reference that we can actually modify the volume across the board for the piece of audio. Now sometimes we don't need that, but if we have a great example, and I'm going to show you another cool trick too. Clicking on the piece of audio, holding the control key, and left clicking, the shift key. There we are. If you hold down the control key and right click, that's what I'm going for, you'll copy that piece of audio somewhere. So I hold down the control key and right click and I copy that audio. So a great example is you have two pieces of audio on the same track, but you want one to be louder than the other. Real simple. You may have your track at -5. Okay? So the track may be at -5, but remember you've taken another volume pan down another -3. So it's really at that's right, 8. So you can edit pieces of audio in the string on the same track and reduce their volume there too. Same thing with pan. If you want to make something in the left channel, right channel, back and forth, you can do that. So I showed you how to copy a piece of audio too. The next thing I'm going to show you is, remember the edge editing. We can grab that and track that and move it back and forth like painting. The other thing that I'm going to show you is a really good tool if you're doing music beds or editing music or a voice. Let's say we want to stop it right here. I'll right click and do a split. Now normally what I'll do is I'll put my cursor there and do a Control K. Now Control K splits the track in two. You see that? Now there's two pieces of audio here. So I can immediately delete the one that I don't like, right click on the other one and drag it over, and it snaps right there where it wants to go. So we can make those edits. A Control K or a split is a really good way to pick out a piece of audio in the middle of something that you don't like and change it. Another piece of information I can give you is if you're doing voice work, and I'm going to pull up a piece of voice here. Again, instead of actually clicking over in the import file, I'm going to double click inside that window and open it up. Let's see here. So there's my untitled, which is my VO.
Get ready for the all-American 4th of July blowout sale.
Okay, so there's a piece of VO. I'm going to drag that into my multitrack. Zoom in where I can see it. Okay, and I'm just scrolling with the mouse where I know I'm on the top and bottom. If I wanted to edit this timeout, the quickest way to do that is to Control K and do what's called checkerboarding. And I'll show you why they call it that. Now all of a sudden, with my we want to put this back to 0 for the volume. And what I do is I click on that number and just type it in. But if we want to do what's called checkerboarding, the human ear can actually interpret audio at the same time, two pieces of audio at the same time. So this piece here I can put on the tail end of that one and bring this piece over here on the other end. Now all of a sudden, and I'm going to give you a great example of that, I'm going to Control Z everything out. So right now my audio, looking at my time signature, is 6 seconds long. But if I do my Control K's to split the pieces of audio out and do what's called checkerboarding, not where they're on top of one another, because see actually how the dead space in the front takes over the audio on the other piece? I don't want to go over the top of it. I want it to play at the same time. That's where the benefit of the multitrack comes in.
Get ready for the all-American 4th of July blowout sale at Jimmy Grandje Ford.
Now all of a sudden, I'm at 5.7 seconds. And if I zoom in and I find another place to split, I can just simply checkerboard those. And the reason they call it checkerboarding is because if you do this enough with a piece of voice, it looks exactly like a checkerboard.
Get ready for the all-American 4th of July blowout sale at Jimmy Grandje Ford.
Perfect. Now, the cool news is I just shaved about 1.5 seconds, maybe even 2 seconds off of a 7-second piece of audio. Imagine a 30-second piece of audio that you checkerboard down. You can save as much as 8 to 10 seconds, depending on how much space is in there. The next thing, and probably the last thing for this video, is really cool. It's called the mute, solo, and record arm parts of the track. The mute mutes that track
Get ready
so that it's silent. The solo only plays that track.
for the all-American.
And the R, or the arm for record, arms that track, but here's the rub. It will record in here and play the other pieces of audio. So you have to be prepared for that. So you've armed it to record, but it's still waiting to actually get the go. If I hit record right now, it would record into this track, but also play the bottom track. It would actually start where the cursor is. So if I hit the home key, it would play this piece, record over this piece, which is not what I want. If I'm doing an armed record, I want to arm my recording in a separate track altogether. But that way I can actually hear what's going on in the other tracks while I'm recording. Lastly is, of course, the volume on this side. If you want to grab that and drag to the left and right, you can do the volume for that particular track. And the pan for that whole entire track. There's a lot more to go into in terms of the effects, the favorites, the different views, the different things you can do and accomplish with this, like beat mapping. That's a great one. But that'll have to be for another video. Thanks so much for watching this and taking the time out to learn a little bit about Adobe Audition 3.0. More to come, that's guaranteed. Thanks.